The wind pressed against stone, whispering secrets the crown could never silence. 1,000 ghosts listening close. A candle trembled inside the queen's chamber, its flame bowing to fears she dared not name. Across the channel, bells rang for dawn. But in England's heart, shadows woke before the sun. They called her Gloriana, the Virgin Queen, untouchable, radiant, chosen by God, yet haunted by doubt. Behind the silk and gold, her pulse betrayed the calm, faster, sharper, each beat a warning drum. Somewhere beyond the walls, a name crept through corridors, soft as breath, heavy as sin. Mary. The sound of it could still a room, curdle wine, still laughter in the throat. A sister by blood and by crown, yet the mirror she could never bear to face. Elizabeth ruled a kingdom of whispers, and every whisper carried Mary's ghost through her gilded halls. Advisors spoke of policy, of France, of Spain, but the real enemy sat imprisoned in flesh. For Mary's existence alone split the English soul. Half adored her, half prayed for her death. Elizabeth's nights were long, her windows latched tight, though she claimed no fear of mortal hands. But it was not the assassin she dreaded. It was the woman who smiled like destiny. For Mary's face was youth reborn, the beauty England once loved, the faith England now feared. In every court painter's canvas, Elizabeth saw the lie of her own perfection reflected. Time carved her features while Mary's remained in memory, radiant, tragic, crowned in sorrow's light. And somewhere deep within, envy twined itself with terror until neither could be told apart. How could one woman embody both her sin and her salvation? The question lingered unspoken. Each letter from Scotland burned like a confession, each signature a blade pressed gently to the throat. She would sign them always Elizabeth R., the flourish trembling at the end like a heartbeat. Rumors spread faster than treaties, faster than plague, faster than prayer across the damp English fog. Catholics whispered that Mary was the rightful queen, pure, divine, chosen by heaven's brighter hand. Protestants saw in Elizabeth a necessary sword, but even swords grow weary of blood. When Elizabeth gazed upon her crown, she saw not gold, but iron forged from fear's own breath. Every jewel shimmered with guilt's reflection, each sparkle a reminder of one unburied truth. A throne is never safe while another claim beats beneath a breathing rival's chest. So she watched, always watched, the letters, the couriers, the shifting loyalties of court and church. She smiled for ambassadors, laughed for courtiers, prayed for strength, but slept beside dread's shadow. And each dawn, when sunlight struck her ring, she wondered if tomorrow would be her undoing. Mary waited, writing prayers in captivity that reached London like echoes of unfinished hymns. Her quill scratched softly, hope, forgiveness, power, all written in ink darker than the Queen's sleep. Elizabeth read them by candlelight, and in every line she heard the turning of a key. Because somewhere in those words, Mary still ruled, not from a throne, but from the trembling heart of England. Her presence lingered like perfume after a vanished lover, impossible to capture, impossible to forget. And the Queen, who had everything, still feared the one woman who needed nothing but her name. In the still hours before dawn, Elizabeth would pace the corridors where her father's ghost once ruled. The echoes of his boots followed her, reminders of crowns gained through blood and brittle faith. She knew the price of rule was loneliness, but fear was its crueler companion, ever whispering close. Each morning, courtiers bowed low, their eyes trained to mirror loyalty but never trust. They brought her gifts, petitions, alliances, and beneath them, questions no monarch could answer. What if the true queen wore chains? What if England's heart belonged to another woman's prayer? The tower stood silent across the river, its stones wet with the weight of history's tears. Elizabeth often stared toward it from her window, as if drawn to its cold confession. She had once been prisoner there herself, accused of treason, trembling as Mary had. And that was the secret she never spoke. She saw herself in her captive's reflection. Both women born of storm and scandal, daughters of ambition's restless ghosts. Both baptized in suspicion, and both crowned by hands they could not trust. Mary was locked away, yes, but her presence spread like incense through England's conscience. Her letters crossed borders wrapped in silk and scripture, carried by those who believed her divine. Each word was a seed, each blessing a weapon, each prayer a spark for rebellion's fire. Elizabeth's counsel urged her to act, to silence the danger before it grew into war. But she hesitated, torn between blood and throne, faith and survival, mercy and memory. For how do you kill the woman who mirrors your soul and call it justice? At night, she would stand before her mirror, watching the candlelight bend across her aging face. The years had taken softness from her cheeks, but not the shadows beneath her eyes. She wondered if Mary still prayed for her, or for the crown that sleep could not protect. Even the palace walls seemed to lean closer, listening, holding their breath with her. Her maids whispered of dreams, of a queen's ghost pacing halls of crimson and gold. Elizabeth told them to hush, but sometimes she too heard the faint rustle of a gown. The kingdom was changing. The old faith wounded but not dead. The new faith restless and young. Every sermon carried accusation, every mass rebellion. And in that chaos, the memory of Mary stood taller than any army. Elizabeth's fear became habit, a second crown she could never remove. It glittered in her thoughts, heavy as iron, cold as morning dew on marble. No armor could shield her from the terror of inheritance, the curse of royal blood. One stormy night, she ordered Mary moved, farther inland, away from sympathizers, away from hope. The decision cut through her like a blade she herself had forged. Keep her safe, she told them, though she meant keep me safe from her. As the riders departed, torches flaring in the rain, she felt a strange stillness descend. It was not victory nor relief, only the hush before a wound begins to bleed. She pressed a trembling hand to her crown, feeling its edges bite like confession. For every mile Mary was taken from her, Elizabeth felt her shadow stretch longer. Distance, she realized, did not weaken fear. It only gave it room to grow. And somewhere in the echoing dark, a voice she knew too well whispered her name. Remember me. The words were not spoken aloud, yet they lived in every heartbeat that followed. And from that moment, Elizabeth knew she would never again rule alone. The walls that held Mary were thick with damp, their stones breathing like tired, sleepless sentinels. Outside, the moors stretched into mist, a pale ocean that swallowed both time and mercy whole. Her prison was not a dungeon, but a manor wrapped in velvet chains and careful courtesy. Servants bowed, yet watched her every glance, their silence heavier than any spoken insult. Even the air felt observed, each sigh measured, each prayer echoing into rooms that never forgot. She was queen still, though her kingdom had shrunk to the width of her guarded chamber. Mary learned the rhythm of captivity, the scrape of keys, the whisper of her own breath. The quill became her sword, parchment her battleground, words her only remaining weapon. She wrote to kings and cousins, weaving faith and hope into sentences sharp enough to wound. To her captors, she was a relic of the old world, too beautiful, too dangerous to destroy. To her followers, she was a saint in exile, haloed by injustice and divine right. And somewhere between saint and prisoner, Mary began to see power in her powerlessness. Each sunrise was a ceremony, candles lit not for worship, but for remembering who she was. The rosary beads pressed into her palm, cold as confession, steady as heartbeat. She prayed not for release, but for endurance, for the patience to haunt, not just to live. In dreams, she saw Scotland's hills, her son's eyes, the court that once trembled at her laughter. But when she woke, only the steady drip of rain kept her company, England's lullaby. Still, she smiled at her reflection, the kind of smile that promises history its vengeance. Letters came, hidden within the folds of gowns, sewn into hems, disguised as scripture. Each word from outside was a flame flickering against her dark, proof she had not been erased. And with every letter, her legend grew, whispered across Europe in languages of faith and rebellion. Elizabeth received reports daily. Every sigh Mary breathed catalogued, every letter intercepted. Her council read them by candlelight, debating how long such silence could be endured. Elizabeth herself read none aloud, but kept them sealed beneath her pillow, unread yet known. For she understood something her men did not, that fear feeds best on the things left unsaid. To read Mary's words would be to breathe her again, to summon her shadow back into the room. And so she avoided them, even as she dreamt of her handwriting. Mary's jailers changed faces, noblemen and spies, priests and soldiers, but her defiance did not. She greeted each one with calm grace, the poise of a woman born knowing the cost of crowns. Her silence unnerved them. Her dignity disarmed them more than threats ever could. One night, as stormlight broke across the sky, she wrote a single line that outlived them all. "If I must die, let it be as a queen, not as a sinner begging mercy." The ink bled slowly, as though time itself paused to remember the shape of her courage. News of that letter reached Elizabeth before dawn, carried by a trembling messenger, half afraid to speak. The queen dismissed the man but kept the parchment, tracing each word with cold, pale fingers. In that moment, she felt something shift, a strange admiration, almost tenderness, poisoned by envy. For Mary had what she never truly possessed, peace within her own ruin. Elizabeth ruled a world that bowed in fear. Mary commanded loyalty born of love. And it was love, not rebellion, that made her truly dangerous. Outside, the storm quieted, leaving only the ticking of time between them. Two queens, divided by faith, yet bound by the mirror's cruel design. One waiting to rise again, the other waiting for the courage to end her waiting. Seasons changed, and with them, Mary's keepers came and went like uncertain tides. Each new warden believed himself the one to tame her quiet strength, to humble a born sovereign. Yet every man who entered her orbit left with the uneasy sense that he'd been the captive instead. Mary moved through captivity as through a ritual, deliberate, precise, dignified to the edge of defiance. She embroidered her faith into cloth, stitched prayers into every thread that crossed her patient hands. Visitors saw only calm devotion, but behind her downcast eyes lived calculation sharper than glass. Rumors escaped faster than her letters. They traveled in servants' whispers and merchants' songs. A candle seen burning late meant hope. A curtain drawn meant secret counsel. By the time those rumors reached London, they had become prophecy spoken on village lips. Elizabeth heard of it in fragments, peasants naming Mary our true queen by hearth and tavern fire. Each retelling spread like ivy, creeping unseen, cracking the mortar of Elizabeth's fragile peace. Her counsel pleaded for harshness, yet she hesitated, tasting the bitterness of her own indecision. At court, laughter grew thin, replaced by the rustle of parchment and the shuffle of spies. Mary's name was no longer spoken openly, yet its silence filled every pause in conversation. The court itself had become another prison, only this one gilded, perfumed, and terribly awake. In captivity, Mary learned to play the game her cousin mastered. She wielded patience like a scepter. She listened more than she spoke, smiled more than she pleaded. She let others dream of rescuing her, knowing that dreams are the easiest rebellions to spark. One young courier knelt before her, trembling with belief, whispering of coded letters and hidden allies. Mary's voice was gentle, yet her words struck like hammers against the walls of her confinement. "Do not fight for me," she said. "Fight for the soul of the crown that forgot mercy." The boy left weeping, and by nightfall half the countryside whispered of angels in chains. From that moment, Mary ceased to be a woman in prison. She became an idea uncontained. Ideas, Elizabeth knew, cannot be strangled or silenced. They outlive every rope, every law, every fear. Alone in her chamber, Elizabeth pressed her palm to the cold glass of her window. Rain traced thin silver paths down the panes, like ink upon unwritten confessions. She wondered what prayer Mary whispered tonight, and to which God both of them truly belonged. Sleep came only in fragments, each dream a theater where Mary always took the stage. In some, she wore white, forgiving. In others, crimson, accusing, crowned in the firelight of judgment. Elizabeth woke gasping, unsure whether she feared her cousin's death or her return. At dawn, she ordered new surveillance, more riders, more spies, more letters intercepted. But control is a net that tightens hardest around its own maker. The more she grasped, the clearer Mary's image became, rising luminous in resistance. Across the narrow sea, Catholics began to murmur of deliverance. Pope and prince alike saw in Mary a weapon sanctified by her suffering. Each prayer abroad became a whisper of conspiracy in London's streets. And through it all, Mary waited, composed, luminous, terrifying in her patience. Every gesture she made seemed rehearsed for eternity, every silence a line in her legend. She knew that queens are remembered not for how they ruled, but how they endured. Elizabeth received the final report that summer. The prisoner smiles often, speaks little, and prays without end. She folded the paper slowly, hearing in those words her own defeat disguised as observation. Because even locked away, Mary still reigned, if not over England, then over its sleepless queen. The year turned restless, like a wounded beast pacing the cage of its own making. Across England, the wind carried rumors of rebellion, the north rising in Mary's name. Bells tolled in secret, priests whispered Latin beneath moonlit rafters, and hearts remembered Rome. In the dim halls of the tower, Elizabeth read report after trembling report. "Your cousin's name, Majesty. It has become a prayer." Each parchment seemed to smell faintly of incense and betrayal. The northern lords had unfurled banners, crimson crosses upon white. They spoke of restoring the true faith, of freeing the rightful queen. Every mile they rode south felt like the tightening of a noose around Elizabeth's reign. She gathered her counsel in silence. Cecil's voice cracked like frost. "If Mary lives, England bleeds." But Elizabeth's answer came soft, like a confession. "And if she dies, my soul does." For nights she walked her chambers, sleepless, haunted by her mother's ghost. Anne Boleyn, another woman condemned by fear, wearing the mask of justice. The echo of the blade still whispered in Elizabeth's blood. Meanwhile, in her lonely fortress, Mary knelt in prayer before a darkened cross. She prayed not for freedom, but for purpose. Her words were steady, not pleas, but vows. She wrote letters by candlelight, the wax trembling like her breath. Every line a spark sent across the storm, seeking kindling in hidden hearts. She signed them with a flourish, Mary R., Queen by the grace of God. Smuggled by couriers and loyal hands, the letters crossed the kingdom's veins. Some reached Spain, some reached the Pope, and one, by fate's cruel humor, reached Walsingham. England's spider of intelligence, silent, pale, and patient as death itself. Walsingham read every curve of her handwriting like a priest reading confession. He saw not just treason, but the poetry of defiance. To him, faith was dangerous, especially when it wore a crown. The web tightened. Servants were questioned, couriers vanished, and even ink was tested for secrets. Every word Mary had written became another nail in her coffin. Still, she smiled when they brought her bread and wine. She spoke of forgiveness, of the Queen's loneliness, of England's need for grace. Her captors left her cell disturbed, not by her danger, but by her serenity. Elizabeth received the intercepted letter at dawn. She stared at her cousin's handwriting, so graceful it could almost be mistaken for prayer. The words that condemned her were gentle, but clear enough to pierce any heart. When the deed is done, may God forgive us both. Elizabeth felt the world tilt beneath her. The morning light through the window seemed colder than truth itself. She whispered to no one, "She calls upon God, yet leaves me to answer." As she pressed the letter to her chest, something within her cracked. Not anger, but mourning. For Mary had not only challenged her throne, she had sanctified her rebellion. And faith, Elizabeth knew, was a fire no ruler could contain once lit. Outside, the bells tolled again. Not for prayer this time, but for the blood yet to fall. And somewhere in the northern mist, the rebellion began to move. The rebellion burned quickly like a candle starved of air. The northern lords who swore by Mary's name found their prayers drowned in steel. Elizabeth's armies swept through frost and ash, banners stiff with frozen blood. Villages whispered her vengeance. Men hanged in rows along the moors. The Queen's mercy, they said, was colder than winter itself. But in her heart, Elizabeth felt no triumph, only the echo of loss. For every rebel slain, she saw a prayer unanswered. For every gallows raised, she heard her mother's ghost weep. And still, Mary lived. In captivity, Mary's spirit did not wither. It ripened. Her beauty, once her weapon, became her myth. Her letters, her psalms, her silence, all turned into relics of resistance. To her followers, she was not a prisoner. She was a saint in chains, suffering for the true faith. Every candle lit for her burned a little hole in Elizabeth's crown. Meanwhile, in London, Walsingham's men sifted through ashes and whispers. The Queen's spies moved like ghosts between taverns and chapels. They hunted words, not men, oaths sworn in the dark, names murmured at confession. And every road, every voice, every sin led back to one name, Mary, the woman who prayed for England's soul and endangered its queen. Elizabeth began to fear the sound of her own conscience. The name Mary lingered in her mind like the toll of a bell. At night, she dreamed of twin crowns, both dripping with dew and blood. Her confessor spoke gently. "Your Majesty, even Christ forgave those who condemned him." But she turned away. "I am not Christ," she whispered, "and she is not innocent." In those words, Elizabeth felt both judgment and justification. Letters from across Europe arrived like daggers wrapped in silk. The Pope himself excommunicated her, called her a heretic, a usurper, an unnatural queen. And all who read it whispered that God had chosen his side. Elizabeth laughed when she heard it, but her laughter cracked. Faith was no longer her comfort. It was her enemy. And Mary, in her darkened cell, had become its face. The Queen of Scots began to write again, longer, bolder, closer to treason. Every word carried the perfume of martyrdom. Every sentence was a prayer made sharp enough to draw blood. When the guards entered, she asked only for parchment and light, and when they refused, she smiled. "Then I shall write on their hearts instead." They left her, trembling, not from fear, but from something like reverence. For even captive, she commanded belief, and belief once given is never easily reclaimed. Elizabeth, in her glittering solitude, began to envy her. She had the throne, the crown, the kingdom. Mary had the people's prayers, and perhaps their love. And love, the Queen knew, was the most dangerous power of all. That night, The two queens prayed to the same God, one for deliverance, one for strength, both certain that heaven must choose, and neither ready for his silence. The fire of faith, once kindled, now consumed them both. Mary prayed not for forgiveness, but for destiny. And Elizabeth, in her guilt, mistook survival for grace. As dawn broke, the rebellion lay dead. But the war of souls had just begun. Mary's prison remained, her name forbidden, her prayers unwelcome. Yet in every chapel, in every whisper, her shadow lived on. For faith is not killed by swords. It lingers in memory, waiting for its hour. And in Elizabeth's heart, that hour was drawing near. It began with a letter, simple, sealed, and meant for no one's eyes. Yet that letter would carry the weight of crowns and the ruin of two queens. It was not ink, but destiny that stained its pages. Walsingham's men had waited for this moment, patient, cold, and tireless. They built traps not of swords, but of parchment and wax. And when Mary wrote back, she stepped into history's snare. In that letter, she agreed to the unthinkable. She spoke of deliverance, of freedom, of God's will upon England's throne. She signed her name, Mary, R., and sealed her own fate. The Babington Plot, they called it later. A web spun by loyalty, faith, and desperation. But to Elizabeth, it was something far simpler. Proof. Proof that the sister she'd spared now sought her death. Proof that mercy, once given, returns only as a knife. Proof that God himself had turned his gaze away. Walsingham brought the letter to her chamber, his hands trembling not from fear, but victory. He laid it before her, a relic of betrayal. Elizabeth did not touch it. She simply stared. "Are you certain?" she asked, voice low as smoke. "Certain, Majesty," he answered. "She writes with her own hand." And with those words, the bond between sisters broke forever. For years, Elizabeth had feared Mary's name. Now she feared her own judgment. For what is justice when it wears the face of kin? Outside, the palace burned with whispers. Courtiers spoke softly of execution, of trials, of God's will in mortal hands. But none dared meet Elizabeth's eyes. They were mirrors of torment. Night fell heavy, muffling the bells of Westminster. Elizabeth walked alone through her chambers, candles trembling in her wake. Each flame bent toward her, as if drawn to her guilt. Mary slept in captivity, dreaming of skies she would never see again. The walls that enclosed her seemed almost kind now. They had become her chapel, her tomb, her truth, and still she prayed. Not for freedom, but for vindication. She believed heaven would use her death to crown her faith. And in that belief she found peace Elizabeth never would. Days turned to weeks, silence to tension. The council pressed for a verdict. Parliament demanded her head. Elizabeth delayed, wavered, pleaded with time itself to turn back. For she knew what must come, and she could not bear to command it. To kill Mary was to kill part of herself, the part that still believed in forgiveness. Yet the world did not wait for her conscience. The men of state sharpened their quills like blades. Papers were drawn, signatures gathered, the machinery of death grinding forward. When at last she signed, the pen felt heavier than any sword. Her name, Elizabeth R., flowed like blood across the page. And though no tear fell, her heart broke quietly beneath her silence. The warrant was sent, sealed with the weight of centuries, and with it, the last thread of sisterhood was cut. But in the stillness that followed, Elizabeth whispered, "God forgive me, I am still her sister." Yet even heaven that night seemed too far to hear. The stars blinked out behind fog, and the Thames rolled black and endless below. England slept, unaware that its queen had just condemned her own mirror. For in Mary, Elizabeth had always seen herself, wild, proud, unbroken. And now that reflection was about to die. The question was no longer if, but how much of her would die with it. Fotheringhay Castle stood still beneath a gray February sky. Its stones, damp and old, seemed to mourn before the deed was done. Inside, a queen prepared to die as if she were preparing for mass. Mary dressed herself in scarlet, the color of martyrdom. Her ladies wept, but she smiled with the calm of one who had already crossed the threshold. "Do not mourn me," she said softly. "I die in faith, not in fear." Outside, the scaffold waited, wood pale as bone, smelling of cold and oak. The air was sharp enough to wound. Every sound, every footstep, carried like a prayer unanswered. The guards opened the door. Mary walked forward without trembling, rosary in hand, dignity her only crown. She climbed the steps slowly, as if each one brought her closer to heaven. Onlookers filled the chamber, nobles, scribes, witnesses of history. Some turned away, others watched with hollow reverence. Few would forget the sound of her voice. "I forgive my enemies," she said, "for I die a true woman of faith." Then, turning her gaze skyward, "May God have mercy on this realm and on my cousin S. soul." Those words fell like frost upon the crowd. She knelt upon the block. Her lips moved in prayer, Latin, soft, unbroken. The executioner raised his blade, hands trembling, eyes wet with dread. The first strike faltered. The second found its mark. A hush fell so heavy it smothered breath itself. When it was done, her head was lifted, red cloth and silence all around. Someone whispered, "Long live the Queen." But no one knew which queen they meant. In London, the message came wrapped in fear. Elizabeth received it not as a triumph, but as a curse. The parchment slipped from her hand before the words even reached her heart. "What have they done?" she cried, a sound torn between fury and grief. "I never gave the order!" But the ink of her signature said otherwise. For days, she locked herself away, curtains drawn against both light and judgment. Servants heard her pacing through the night, muttering to shadows that answered only in echoes. Mary was gone, yet everywhere. Her ghost lingered in every corridor, every silence between breaths. Elizabeth saw her in mirrors, in dreams, in the tilt of candlelight. When wind brushed her window, it carried the scent of guilt. Was this justice? She whispered to no one. Or vengeance wearing God's mask? The question would haunt her to her last breath. Across Europe, Mary's death became a legend. Painters rendered her in glory. Priests spoke her name at the altar. She was no longer a queen, she was a symbol. Elizabeth, the living queen, became the haunted one. She had survived, but something sacred within her had not. The cost of power had finally revealed itself, and it wore her sister's face. For years after, she forbade anyone to speak Mary's name, but silence could not bury what conscience would not forget. Even the air seemed to whisper, "You killed your mirror." Her courtiers found her often staring out at the horizon. When asked what she saw, she would answer, "Scotland." And though her voice was steady, her eyes were not. In her private chapel, she prayed longer than before. Not for forgiveness, for that felt too distant, but for peace, the kind she had stolen and could never return. The bells tolled for Mary, but they echoed for Elizabeth. For both queens, the throne had been a cage, and only death had found the key. The world called one a martyr and the other a monarch. Yet history, patient and merciless, would remember them as one story. Two crowns, one fate, and the haunting that followed power into eternity. Years passed, yet the sound of that axe never left her. It echoed behind Elizabeth's every triumph, every song of glory that followed her reign. For even victory, when born from blood, grows hollow in the heart. The court still called her Gloriana, the Virgin Queen, England's light reborn. But within her chambers, she walked among ghosts, and one name lingered louder than all the prayers of her people. Mary. Mary, the sister she had feared. Mary, the rival she had killed. Mary, who refused to die. Her portrait hung in a distant hall, veiled and forgotten. Yet Elizabeth felt it watching her, eyes burning through the dust of time. Each night she imagined that painted mouth whispering, not curses, but questions. Was it worth it, sister? Did the crown ever love you back? The queen would wake before dawn, trembling, candle burned to nothing. Outside, London prospered beneath her rule. Theaters flourished, ships conquered seas, and poets praised her as immortal. However, immortality felt more like a punishment than a reward. She had no heir, no companion, no child to remember her laughter. Only advisors, flatterers, and the soft decay of time. Each face she loved had turned to dust, leaving only echoes in the corridors. In the winter of her age, Elizabeth began to speak to the wind. She would stand at her window, wrapped in ermine and silence, and the night air, cold and still, seemed to answer. Sometimes it carried the scent of heather, the smell of Scotland. Sometimes a voice low and tender, threading through the leaves. Not accusation, almost forgiveness. Do you still fear me, sister? The queen closed her eyes, and for a moment she felt peace. But when she opened them, the window was empty, and dawn was cruel. She kept Mary's last letter hidden in a chest by her bed. She read it often, not for comfort, but as a form of punishment. Its ink had faded, but its grace remained sharp. I pray for your soul, dear cousin, it said, as I go to meet my God. Elizabeth traced those words until her fingers trembled. They were softer than any sermon, heavier than any crown. Her ladies whispered that she spoke less now, that she dined in silence, stared too long at the fire, that her reflection frightened her more than age itself. For in the mirror, she sometimes saw another face, calm, pale, eternal. The face of the queen she killed but could not bury. And behind that face, her own, weary, alone, and afraid. Every triumph faded into the stillness of night. The laughter of her youth had turned to memory, and memory, once tender, had become her tormentor. The wind outside grew colder that year. The fires in her palace burned low as if in mourning. Even the musicians played softer, their songs reluctant to disturb her thoughts. Elizabeth ruled still, but ruled in silence. Her council obeyed her commands, yet saw the shadow in her eyes. For she had learned what no crown could teach. Power cannot silence remorse. And so she waited, not for rebellion or war, but for peace. A peace she had denied her sister, and now denied herself. The kind that does not come with victory, but with surrender. One night, as the moon spilled silver across the tapestries, she spoke aloud. To be queen is to be haunted. The chamber did not answer. Only the wind sighed in reply. The end did not come with thunder or storm. It came softly, like candlelight thinning before dawn, like a sigh that refused to rise. Elizabeth was no longer feared nor adored, only remembered. The courtiers moved quietly through Whitehall's dim corridors. They said their queen no longer spoke of the state, only of dreams. And in every dream, another woman was waiting by a window. Mary's shadow had followed her through every year, every crown, every prayer. But now it seemed less a ghost and more a mirror, a reflection of what she once was, wild, proud, human. Her old nurse sat beside her, brushing thin silver hair. "Your Majesty," she whispered, "shall I light more candles?" Elizabeth smiled faintly. "No, Bess, there is light enough." For the first time, she was not afraid of the dark. The fire before her crackled like an old friend's laughter. The warmth touched her face gently, as though forgiving her sins. She spoke then to the silence that knew her best. I see her still, you know, in the garden, in the sea, in the glass. She never hated me. She pitied me. A pause, then a breath, almost a prayer. She was free, even in chains, and I was chained, even on my throne. Tears welled but did not fall. Her pride held them, as always. Outside, spring stirred faintly in the air. Buds pressed through cold earth. Swans drifted downriver beneath the fog. Life, careless and constant, moved on. Elizabeth asked that her mirror be covered. I have looked enough at myself, she murmured. Let God see me now. The servants obeyed, leaving her face to memory alone. Hours passed in quiet vigil. The queen rested, yet her lips moved, forming words no one could hear. Perhaps prayers, perhaps apologies, perhaps both. As dawn crept across the floor, she stirred once more. Her hand reached toward the space beside her bed, and for a moment she smiled, soft, peaceful, certain. Those who were there swore they saw it. A shimmer of white at the window, the outline of another queen, a calm presence, as if watching over her at last. Then, with one long exhale, Elizabeth was gone. No cry, no struggle, only stillness and the faint scent of roses. England's Gloriana had returned to dust and to history's dream. When they laid her in Westminster, they placed her atop Mary's tomb. Two queens, one grave, the living and the dead reconciled beneath stone and silence. Above them, the carved words read, partners in throne and grave. But perhaps the truer epitaph lay unspoken, sisters at last. For what fear could survive in such sleep? Centuries have passed, yet the candle of their story still flickers. Elizabeth, the mind of power. Mary, the soul of faith, both haunted by love, both undone by destiny. And somewhere, beyond the reach of crowns, their shadows walk together still, not in rivalry, but in remembrance. For in the end, history belongs not to the victors or the martyrs, but to those who dared to be both. And together they did. The wind sighs along Westminster's stones, gentle and endless. If you listen closely, you can almost hear them whisper, "We are free now, sister, at last we are free." The centuries turned, and the world forgot their voices, but not their silence. That silence still breathes through the corridors of history, where crowns glitter faintly beneath the dust. Visitors in Westminster walk past two marble effigies, lying side by side, hands folded, eyes closed, stone sisters sharing the same eternal sleep. Few notice the detail that matters most, that their tomb bears no divide, no wall between their names. In death, they lie as one. Time has softened the edges of their story. The hatred, the faith, the trembling fear of betrayal, all reduced to whispers, like candle smoke curling toward heaven. And yet, listen closely. Beneath that quiet lies the true weight of their tale. Not of queens or crowns, but of women, and the burdens they were never free to set down. Mary ruled hearts, not armies. Her beauty, her faith, her defiance. These were her weapons, and they doomed her as surely as they defined her. Elizabeth ruled minds, not hearts. Her brilliance, her caution, her solitude, they built an empire, but left her soul in ruin. Both sought God, and both found only reflection. For in one another, they saw what power could never reconcile, belief and doubt, mercy and fear. In the quiet beyond history, perhaps they have spoken again, not as queens, not as rivals, but as two weary spirits forgiving the world that judged them both. The candle gutters. The halls of Whitehall and Holyrood stand empty, their laughter long vanished, their secrets are left to sleep beneath stone and prayer. But still the wind carries their story, through the heather of Scotland, over the Thames, through every place where faith and power have touched. And if you wake in the night, to the creak of a door or the hush of unseen footsteps, listen gently. It may be only history remembering them. For no throne can silence conscience, no crown can bury guilt, and no queen, however mighty, can escape the sister she once feared. Their story is England's heartbeat, steady, sorrowed, eternal. Two women bound by blood and freed only by forgiveness. So now, as the candle burns low and the night folds its wings around you, rest knowing this. Even queens must learn to let go. You are safe, you are warm, and you are part of a story that never truly ends. Good night.